When I got enlightened to healthy eating, and I've always eaten healthy or made an effort to eat healthy. But when I really got enlightened to the science when I got enlightened to the science of macros and how that affects your body and how that serve particular portions of particular foods affects your body, I realized, it wasn't until then I realized how hard it was to make a conscious decision and effort to eat more protein. I knew I was educated on how much more protein the body needed according to your body weight and your age and all these other factors. And so when I would go grocery shopping, my biggest challenge was to find more protein. Now, of course, I've always known that, if you shop around the refrigerators of the grocery store, you'll get the most healthiest food, right? You'll get the food that you really truly need. And most of the junk food is within the aisles, or most of the carb saturated food is within the aisles, or the carbohydrate products are in the aisles. All the starches, chips, pastas, so on and so forth, right? But then I was like, wait a minute. You drive down the street and you look at every fast food restaurant. Of course, they're selling some sort of protein, whether it be chicken or burgers, right? But it's the side dishes that are the real draw. The burger could be bland as heck, with just a few toppings, but you got to have those fries. You know what I mean? And I had to, make it up in my mind for my own personal discipline to just say, to hell with it. Potatoes are the devil. And so I asked myself, is there a conspiracy? Is the American diet incentivized for carbohydrates? Because when you think about it economically, carbohydrates are in mass abundance, right? When you think of potato and corn, just that alone, potato and corn alone, you look at the potato chip aisle in the grocery store, it's massive compared to the produce or the meat aisle, right? So it's a mass abundance. It's affordable and it's accessible. With produce and meats, you have to worry about it spoiling. You know what I mean? A bag of chips can last a lot longer than a bag of ground beef. You know what I mean? So it's like, there must be some sort of conspiracy. So I did my little research, i.e. AI. And I wanted to dig deeper. I wanted to get a deeper understanding of the carbohydrate conspiracy in America. Why is the American diet, why is the American citizen being incentivized and what's the word? It starts with a P. Incentivized and subsidized. Why is the American, it's not even with a P. Why is the American citizen being incentivized and subsidized for carbohydrates? Oh, and another thing, carbohydrates are easier for storage. You don't have to worry about freezing or food. You don't have to worry about food storage when it comes to carbohydrates. The worst that can happen is they get stale, right? So that's another ease of entry when it comes to carbohydrates versus proteins. Yet the body needs more protein than it needs carbohydrates. That's the crazy part. So to understand why the modern food landscape is saturated with carbohydrates, it's helpful to look past the idea of a secret cabal and more toward economic gravity. Economic gravity, I like that word. That makes a lot of sense to me. What looks like a conspiracy is actually the result of several powerful forces: policy, biology, and profit. There you go. Economic gravity. That spells it all for me. Aligning to create a feedback loop that favors cheap energy over dense nutrition. So it's easy to be bad, but it's hard to be good. This is basically what this is saying. The economics of carb dominance. Carbohydrates are the undisputed winners of the cost per calorie war. This isn't accidental. It is a result of how we have optimized global agriculture. So when you think of making a bag of potato chips versus a cube of ground beef, you have to store the cow, you have to feed the cow, and then you have to pay someone to slaughter the cow. And then you have to pay someone to process the meat. Then you got to pay someone to package the meat. And then you got to pay someone to deliver it, and so on and so forth. Like there's so much overhead down the chain as opposed to a bag of chips where you can just put it through a machine and dehydrate it, and voila. Production efficiency: plants convert sunlight into calories much more efficiently than animals do. When you think about potatoes and corn, right? From a thermodynamic standpoint, it takes roughly 10 pounds of grain to produce just 1 pound of beef. 10 pounds of grain for just 1 pound of beef. So yeah, so there is an efficiency, there is a production efficiency. Mechanization: crops like corn, wheat, rice can be planted, managed, and harvested by machines at massive scale. Protein, like meat, dairy, and eggs, requires significantly more land, water, labor, and time. And I just explained that. But it's worth it though. That's the thing. It's so worth it. The price per gram gap. In almost every market, carbohydrates act as a price floor. Studies show that adding protein to a food product almost always raises the cost, while adding carbohydrates, fillers, starches, and sugars actually lowers it. See, and that's where the devil is. That's the devil. Because it's like, if you're poor and you've already have bad eating habits from the go, you know what I mean, and you're poor, you know, to add injury to insult, what is your most likely life decision going to be? What are you most likely to do? What are you most likely inclined towards and perpetuated towards? You know what I mean? I think that's the word I was trying to think of earlier. So yeah, so this is the economic gravity of it all. This is the policy, biology, and profit, and how it pans out. So it just pans out that carbohydrates are economically more accessible or more optimal than proteins, because there's less back work and so on and so forth. Less back work, less overhead, and so on and so forth to get it to the consumer. But now let's look at the policy and the feedback loop. Government intervention in the mid-20th century cemented the dominance of carbohydrates. This was initially driven by a noble goal: preventing hunger. So yes, because it's accessible and more accessible and more affordable. When you're in a dire situation, you want people to survive and gain sustenance. It's the quickest route. It's the quickest plug to a dam, as opposed to proteins. Subsidies. Programs heavily favor commodity crops like corn, soy, and wheat. These subsidies keep the raw ingredients for high carb foods officially cheap, making them the default choice for food manufacturers. Historical guidance. The 1977 dietary goals and the subsequent food pyramid encouraged high carb, low fat diets. While based on the science of the time, this provided a political and health shield for the expansion of refined grain products. And this is the uglier side of it, the corporate propaganda for particular foods. We all, if you're an 80s or 90s kid, you all remember the Got Milk ads, right? And you would see some of these celebrities with the milk mustache, and if you can remember even yourself, when you were a little kid, you was drinking a tall glass of milk, when you came home from school, and you would look in the mirror to see if you had a milk mustache, right? You thought it was cool, right? But these things play a part on our psychology. Now, milk would be considered part of a protein-rich food, but just to make a point toward, as far as advertising and marketing and the psychology of the consumer is concerned, we kind of get psychologically herded into eating more carbs. Carbs get popularized. When you look at these cereal commercials, we all grew up watching Tony the Tiger and Wheaties, right? And these kind of things, we don't, like, the average child doesn't know anything about proteins versus carbs.
When you see somebody who is in really good shape, there are a few conclusions you can draw about that person. 1, they're disciplined and they understand dedication. 2, they are patient and they understand commitment, because we know nothing just happens overnight, so they have to be patient with themselves in the process in order to see results. 3, that person is mentally tough. Life hits us with stress, our bodies get fatigued, we get sore, but they don't allow that to become an excuse to give up or to become inconsistent. And 4, they have self-love, because we know that anything that you love, you take care of, even down to the point of it being a sacrificial love, because when you love something, you also keep things away from it that could be harmful, like being gluttonous or alcohol consumption, etc. So when you see somebody who is in really good shape, you're not merely just observing something physical, but it's indicative that there are a lot of other good character traits underlying.
The average child, all the average child knows is Tony the Tiger. That's all they care about. You know what I mean? So yeah, this is the world. This is what we have to psychologically compete against. This is how we have to guard our brains. Social stability. Cheap food prevents social unrest. By saturating the market with inexpensive, shelf-stable calories, mostly carbs, governments ensure that even the lowest income populations can meet their caloric needs, even if their nutritional needs aren't met. They just want to keep you alive. They just keep them alive and keep them fed. You know what I mean? They're doing their part. That's it. And, they say health is wealth. And through this conversation, I start to see that even more. That concept has become even more stark to me. When they say health is wealth, like when you think of a wealthy person, when you think of someone who's rich, you don't think of someone who's, fat and, balding with bad skin, you know what I mean, with those dark patches on their cheeks showing insulin resistance, you know what I mean, because their diet is so greasy and carb heavy, right? You don't think of those things. You think of someone who's lean and sharp looking and well-to-do and fit, right? That's what you think of. Health is wealth. It's a real thing, and not just to be healthy, but being healthy as a sign of being wealthy. That goes even deeper, Let's look into the next topic, the industrial profit machine. So food corporations do not sell nutrition. They sell shelf-stable calories with high margins. Refined carbs, i.e. flour and sugar, are virtually immortal in a pantry. That's exactly what I said. A bag of chips takes a lot longer to spoil than a cube of ground beef. Proteins are highly perishable and require a cold chain refrigeration from farm to table for a corporation. And if you know, HVAC is a very expensive industry. If you've ever purchased a refrigerator, or if you've ever had repairs done on your AC unit, HVAC is a very expensive industry. So it's nothing to play with. For a corporation, carbs represent low risk and high reliability. The bliss point. Food scientists have perfected the quote-unquote bliss point, the exact ratio of salt, sugar, and fat that bypasses the brain's fullness signals and triggers dopamine. This encourages overconsumption and repeat purchases. So basically, scientists in a lab have figured out calculated the perfect ratio to keep you fat, to keep you addicted, not addicted to food, but addicted to sugar. And in the next episode, I will get into sugar addiction. I want to break down sugar addiction, which is very related to this topic, but I feel like it's a standalone topic. Scientists in laboratories, in high corporate laboratories, have figured out the perfect equation to keep you fat. This is the world we live in, guys. This is the reality. Processing ROI. A bushel of corn is worth very little. However, a bushel of corn turned into corn syrup, corn starch, and corn-based snacks is worth a fortune. Amazing. So basically, a bushel of corn is worth more than a cow. A cow produces more cows. They produce milk, and they produce meat, right? But a bushel of corn is worth more. A bushel of corn is worth much more than that. That's crazy. This value-added processing is much easier to do with carbohydrates than with whole proteins. So yeah, that is the industrial profit machine. Now let's look into the satiety and health gap. For those who may not know, I'll be your glossary for you. Satiety, or to be satiated, is just another word for to be full, for your stomach being full, as they say. Right. So the word is satiety, 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 or being satiated. The real conspiracy or systemic failure is the impact on human biology. The satiety cycle. Protein is highly satiating. So basically, even though scientists have figured out the perfect equation to keep you fat and keep you addicted to sugar, or keep you addicted to carbs per se, right? They feed you just enough to keep you wanting more food, whereas protein feeds you enough for you to not want any more food. And that's the beauty of it, because it's so much more. Protein-rich foods are so much more nutritious to begin with. They also more likely to have more vitamins and minerals along with the protein. So protein is highly satiating. It makes you stop eating. Refined carbohydrates cause blood sugar spikes and crashes, which trigger hunger signals shortly after eating. So if you have what in the black community they call the quote-unquote itis, right, where you eat a whole bunch of carb heavy food and then you get sleepy, right? That sleepiness is basically you're basically food drunk. That sleepiness is triggered from your insulin spiking, which is very, very unhealthy. And the last thing you want to do is actually go to sleep. You really ought to go for a walk and bring your blood sugar back down to a healthy level, and burn those calories, burn those excess calories. So when you get that that sleepiness after eating, a protein-rich food wouldn't cause that. A protein-rich food wouldn't even do that. And so not only if you eat a protein-rich food, not only are you not sleepy, but you're not hungry, and in turn you'll have more energy, because that sleepiness is your body saying, hold up, we need to shut down and process all of this extra gas you just put in the tank. We got to burn all of this extra fuel. So take a nap, and It's not it's terrible for your body. It's terrible. But the average uneducated poor person doesn't know or probably wouldn't care because all they're in survival mode, and so health is wealth. If health is wealth, then therefore unhealth is poverty, right? Protein scarcity. Because protein is expensive and makes people stop eating, it is often minimized in the ultra-processed food system. This leads to a population that is overfed calories, but undernourished protein and micronutrients. So yes, we kind of broke that down so it could forever and consistently be broke with the industrial profit machine and the economic gravity, and the government and corporations incentivizing and finding the fat equation to keep you fat, right? So yeah, this is how the cookie crumbles, no pun intended, right? This is how the cookie crumbles. I remember I recently went grocery shopping, and I routinely bought the vegetables that I normally buy. I bought my kale. I bought some jalapenos, some peppers, some onions. Just the savory type vegetables. Normally I'll get some leeks, some cabbage. I'll get the different types of cabbage too. But I bought a lot of vegetables that particular day, and when I swiped them all through the checkout, all the vegetables I swiped through the checkout ran up to about $13. I was like, wow. Who says healthy eating is expensive? You know what I mean? Like it's a sham. It's a sham, really. It's a sham. So in conclusion, there is no secret room of villains, just a system that rewards volume, stability, and profit over longevity and health. So I really, and the reason I wanted to talk about this topic, the carb conspiracy, I want to break down the economics, not just the macroeconomics, but the microeconomics too. So you have to think, protein is more satiating, right? It fills you up quicker and makes you want to eat less, right? A protein-rich diet, per se. So if you're not as hungry all the time, you're not eating so much of it, so you don't need to buy so much of it, right? If you're constantly eating carbs, you're constantly hungry, right? And so you're constantly buying carb-rich food. So even though the carb-rich foods are cheaper, you spend more. You spend just as much, if not more, money on the carb-rich foods, because you're hungrier more often. So in the grand scheme of things, it's still less expensive to eat healthier. It's still less expensive to eat healthier. Prove me wrong. The modern food environment is rigged, quote unquote, toward carbs because they are most efficient. They are the most efficient way to turn industrial chemicals and sunlight into a profitable, shelf-stable product. So there you have it, folks. There you have it. Eating healthy is something you have to be conscious of, and you have to be intentional about, and you have to be determined and disciplined and consistent. Because if health is wealth, unhealth is poverty.